All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Diabetes Diet Makeover Lunch and Learn virtual presentation. This was actually an in-person event, but I'm just going to kind of record everything and go over it with you so that you can keep it as a resource for anyone who couldn't attend. First, I'm just going to start off by going through a few common myths and facts about diabetes. This is through a Kahoot, so I'm just going to kind of like play the Kahoot really quickly and just go through the questions. And you can kind of play along, kind of internally answer. So, true or false, there are two main classes of diabetes, type 1 and type 2. This is actually true. Um, Turn off this sound actually. Can I do that? Yes. So they have different causes and different treatments. Type 1 is an autoimmune disease, and type 2 is more common. It's caused mainly by lifestyle factors such as diet or exercise. There are a lot of similar requirements, though, to both classes, like needing insulin, for example. True or false, carbohydrates are bad for you if you have prediabetes or diabetes. This is actually false. Humans need carbohydrates to function. It is the body's main form of energy for our organs, our brain, all of that kind of stuff. So this is a common myth because carbohydrates do raise blood sugar after they're eaten, but with diabetes, this shouldn't be a problem with proper management, lifestyle, and things like that. True or false, you can get diabetes from eating lots of sugar in a short amount of time. This is definitely false. This is a common myth, though. Eating sugar does not directly cause diabetes. Being overweight can be a risk factor for type 2, which sugary foods can play a role in over a long period of time. But eating too much dessert or cake or ice cream or something like that one time is not going to destroy your pancreas and give you diabetes. It's kind of an over a long period of time kind of thing. True or false, type 2 diabetes affects both adolescents and adults. This is true. As I said before, being overweight is a risk factor for type 2 diabetes, and unfortunately, this is becoming the reality for more and more children in the US. True or false, you can reverse prediabetes and improve diabetes through lifestyle modifications. This is true. So, prediabetes is kind of diagnosed as a warning. It just kind of means that you're on track to getting type 2 diabetes. So it can be reversed, but if it does advance to diabetes, it can be significantly improved, but never reversed. True or false? 1 out of 5 US adults has prediabetes. This is actually false. It is 1 in 3. True or false? Those with diabetes can eat sweets as long as they can administer insulin. So this is very much true. If a high carb or high sugar meal is eaten, it will spike blood sugar indefinitely, whether you have the condition or not. For those with type 1 or 2 diabetes, it's okay as long as insulin is kind of administered to regulate those levels. All right, so now that we've finished up the Kahoot, I'm going to go back to the presentation. Oops. Right. So, just as a little overview introduction to diabetes, the common factor between all of the types is that there are complications with pancreatic function. So, after food is consumed, carbohydrate molecules are broken down into glucose, also known as sugar, and they go directly into the bloodstream, which raises the level of sugar in the blood. When this process occurs in a healthy individual, there are two hormones that stimulate the pancreas to produce insulin. And insulin acts as a transporter that takes the glucose molecules from the blood and brings them to the body's cells so they can store and use the glucose for energy. So it's kind of like if you were pumping gas into a car. If you stand at the pump and you take the pump and put it into the car to fuel it up, if you didn't know how to pump gas or something went wrong, there would be no middleman to actually put the fuel into the car. And that's what insulin does. It is the middleman that kind of takes the glucose, into the cells from the bloodstream so that the body is fueled and can function. So, type 1, as I mentioned earlier, is also known as insulin deficiency. And it is an autoimmune condition where the pancreas doesn't produce any insulin. The only real risk factor is genetics. And because no insulin is produced, it always needs to be administered, which is usually via syringe. Type 2 diabetes is also known as insulin resistance. It has two barriers. So, the first is that the pancreas only produces a little bit of insulin. And the second is that the body kind of resists it and doesn't use it the way it's supposed to. Prediabetes is a state before type 2 where the body is starting to resist insulin. It can be reversed through lifestyle changes, and it's just kind of a warning. You also have gestational diabetes, which only occurs in pregnant women and mimics type 2 diabetes. It typically can be controlled with a healthy diet and exercise. It goes away after pregnancy, but about 50% of women with the condition go on to develop type 2 diabetes. So it's definitely something to be conscious of. According to the American Diabetes Association, 11% of Florida's adult population has diabetes, and that's just who's been diagnosed. Also, about a third of the state's population is obese. And in addition, diabetes is expensive. Those with diabetes pay 2.6 more in medical bills than those without. So you can kind of see the importance of gaining the knowledge about this topic and making changes to improve this issue, whether or not you have it. Because type 1 diabetes is an autoimmune disease that's not preventable, the main risk factor is just diet or genetics, so family history. Type 2 is very much preventable, and the risk factors include family history as well, overweight or obesity, minimal exercise, hypertension, and like many other chronic diseases, the aging process. Research shows that those older than 45 are at a higher risk. So, what does treatment involve? It involves a healthcare team, such as an endocrinologist, pharmacist, your primary care provider, and a dietitian. There are different forms of insulin that are typically used. Long acting insulin is administered usually once daily, and short acting insulin is administered before meals to kind of catch those blood sugar spikes before they happen. Most people are also put on metformin, which is a medication that lowers blood sugar kind of using a different mechanism than insulin. Through diet and lifestyle changes, patients with type 2 can stop insulin altogether and just be on metformin, which is always the goal. Pricking the finger is also a common way to check blood sugar. It's quite a burden, though, to do multiple times a day. So that can increase the risk of blood sugar running too high or too low because people are not wanting to prick their finger multiple times a day. So they are not aware of what their blood sugar is. There are continuous glucose monitors out there that either attach to the back of the arm or the abdomen, and they connect to a sensor or a smartphone app so that the user or a healthcare provider can check blood sugar levels whenever they need to. Insulin pumps are also common, and that's an alternative to the injections by syringe. That's another wearable device that can administer insulin throughout the day. So that's kind of what you can see on the slide. Managing other comorbidities can really improve blood sugar. This includes hypertension, high cholesterol, high triglycerides, and weight. These are all very much possible to manage through dietary interventions. And if untreated, high blood sugar can cause diabetic neuropathy, which is where the nerves get inadequate blood flow. This also leads to amputations, most commonly in the legs and feet. In addition, diabetes is one of the leading causes of blindness for the same reason. It's because the bloodstream basically becomes like too thick with sugar and it kind of blocks nerve signals. So there isn't as much blood flow going throughout the body and can cause a lot of problems. Okay, so I hope I've gotten the point across that this is an important condition to be aware of, and diet is really, really crucial to tackle when treating or preventing diabetes. So I'm going to kind of go into the research of what works. So this cohort study was published in 2023 and observed the intake of various types of beverages in relation to mortality and incidence of cardiovascular disease in individuals with type 2 diabetes. It included over 15,000 participants and followed them from as early as 1980 up to 2018. The average follow up period was 18 and a half years. So this colored chart you can see right here, on a 95% confidence interval, sugar sweetened beverages had a hazard ratio higher than 1 for all cause mortality, cardiovascular disease incidence, and cardiovascular disease mortality. So meaning that compared to a control, higher intakes of sugar sweetened beverages led to an increased risk of these outcomes. This is especially evident here, as you can see that coffee, tea, and plain water did not have the same outcome. In fact, it was the opposite. So it decreased the risk. You can also see here to the right means that an increased amount of that variable will more likely lead to the outcome measured, which is all-cause mortality. Again, sugar sweetened beverages and full fat milk were on the right side. And then the other side, indicating decreased risk, was aspartame sweetened beverages like Diet Coke or something like that, juice, coffee, tea, water, and low fat milk. Of course, we don't know what else participants were eating or doing during the study duration, but the study was really large. The sample size was large and the duration was long. So they were able to conclude that consistently replacing one sugar sweetened beverage per day can reduce risk of mortality by 19% from those results. This is a systematic review published in 2020 that evaluated the effects of higher fiber intake on adults with prediabetes, gestational diabetes, type 1 and type 2, without any additional dietary or lifestyle changes. The review included 44 studies and about 10,000 participants. The average follow-up period was 8.8 years. Sources of fiber were mainly like whole grains, vegetables, whole fruits, and some studies did observe supplementation as well. So some key findings were that people who ate the most fiber had a significantly lower risk of mortality from any cause compared to those who ate the least. Specifically, their risk was reduced by 35% over the average period of 8.8 years. For specifically type 1 and 2 diabetes, there were 14 fewer deaths per 1,000 participants with a daily fiber intake of 35 grams compared to 19 grams. They also saw a decreased HbA1c, which is a critical marker of diabetes progression, lower fasting blood glucose levels, reduced total cholesterol, LDL cholesterol, and triglycerides, and lower body weight and BMI with increased fiber intake. So this also all correlates to lower all-cause mortality. The RDA for fiber in adults is 25 grams per day for women and 38 grams per day for men. And the average American consumes about 30 to 50% of this. So that's 10 to 15 grams per day. With this in mind, the review concluded that increasing dietary fiber intake by 15 grams will reduce the risk of diabetes and significantly improve management for those with it. So because I just talked about why fiber is so important, I want to put it into perspective with how much certain foods contain. So up here, you have a lot of the high fiber foods. You have beans, which obviously are known to keep you regular, which is a big benefit of fiber. You have avocado, chickpeas, oats, berries, and then I also have some popcorn, which is a great snack that is a source of fiber, 5 grams, which is a fifth of the needs per day for women. You also have some common snack foods and just popular foods that I included that people like to eat. So chicken nuggets, pretzels, potato chips, Pop Tarts, all that kind of stuff doesn't really have any 1 gram or less. And finally, you have some swaps that you can make to kind of increase your fiber slowly. So white rice versus brown rice. Brown rice is going to give you an extra 2.9 grams per serving. Dark chocolate is going to give you an extra 2.5 grams. Switching to whole grain pasta instead of regular is going to double, if not more, the amount of fiber in that serving. So, using what we know now, how can we apply this to the diet? I have a quote here. It says, "Becoming 1% better every day counts for a lot in the long run. Success is the product of daily habits, not once in a lifetime transformations." This is a quote from the author of Atomic Habits. I highly suggest giving it a read if you have a habit or like a lifestyle change that you're interested in making. But it is true, you really don't become a certain way overnight. You don't get type 2 diabetes overnight, so we can't fix it immediately either. It is not realistic or sustainable to try to eat clean and perfect all the time. So, with that goal, um, we should kind of take your dietary habits and tweak them a little. With the research in mind, there are a few smart swaps that can kind of help you become 1% better. So, the first category is limiting added sugars. This can include swapping soda for sparkling water, fruit juice for whole fruit, or even like a fresh squeezed fruit juice that doesn't have sugar added to it. Sweetened yogurt for plain yogurt, sweet tea for unsweet tea, milk chocolate for dark chocolate, pre-made sauces for homemade, or just like looking at the label and kind of seeing if there's any sugar added and trying to avoid that. Table sugar for sweeteners like stevia or Splenda, and also coffee syrup for like cinnamon, vanilla extract, lavender, like just something kind of more natural to add flavor that's not just sugar. Another goal is to increase fiber. So just kind of talked about this a little bit. Swapping for whole grain or multigrain varieties. Fruit juice for whole fruit. Again, this kind of achieves two goals at once with limiting added sugar. Eating the fruit whole instead of juice provides more fiber. Potatoes for sweet potatoes, white rice for brown rice, traditional pasta for whole grain, or even like a chickpea lentil pasta, chips or other salty snacks for air popped popcorn, tortillas for whole wheat wraps or wraps that are marketed with high fiber on the label, and also like pizza crust for a whole wheat crust or a cauliflower crust or something like that. And finally, another goal is eating balanced meals for balanced blood glucose. This is an important, very important topic for diabetes management. Just eating those simple sugars like a piece of bread or some crackers will cause blood sugar to spike. And with diabetes, it takes longer for that blood sugar to come back down. So, eating a meal or a snack that contains protein and healthy fats is going to slow down the absorption of carbs in the body so that the blood sugar doesn't spike as much. So this is just kind of something to note. It also will keep you fuller for longer. So nutrition by addition, adding protein to pasta, adding avocado to like omelets or salad, nuts and seeds to yogurt, beans or lentils to salads or soups, or like a protein powder to oats or coffee, something like that. I'm sure you're familiar with the idea of my plate and the idea of kind of having a plate that's equally balanced. So I included that here. This also applies to snacks. I always say, like, if you just eat an apple or a piece of fruit, it'll keep you full for maybe 45 minutes to an hour. But an apple with peanut butter will keep you full for a couple of hours until your next meal because of the protein and fat that's present. So let's practice. So we have a simple cereal and milk. How can we make this meal more diabetes friendly? So there are multiple ways to go about this. I included a lot of them, but just making one swap works. We can change the cereal, make it like a whole grain variety, something like that. We can change the milk, maybe make it like a low fat milk, a skim milk, a soy milk, oat, any of that. Nuts and seeds, those can add a little bit of extra protein and fat. And then I have just like some turkey bacon. So all of this is, a little bit exaggerated. You don't have to like change this completely over to that, but these just show a lot of different swaps that you can make. For lunch, I tried to include something a little bit more realistic. So here, um, say McDonald's is your only option, you only have a certain amount of time. How can we make this a little bit more diabetes or diet friendly? So we can maybe keep the burger, but we can change some of the things around it. So we can make the fries a little bit smaller. We can just do one sauce instead of two, swapping the soda for water, obviously, and maybe even doing some apple slices or something like that. Just kind of making the sides more nutritionally balanced. We also have some ramen here with the seasoning packet. So this is just kind of a very carb heavy meal. So what are some ways that we can kind of keep the meal but make some tweaks to it to make it a little bit more diabetes friendly? So we can add some like vegetables, some seaweed, kimchi, broccoli, just things that kind of go with it. Egg is very popular. And then we can use some seasonings that we have on hand to kind of limit that sodium. Go. Finally, we have a snack. Here you just have some crackers. Instead of snacking on just that, we can add some proteins, a little bit of fat with some meat, crackers, cheese. A little exaggerated, but I'm just kind of showing you some ways to make one thing a little bit more balanced. And finally, what are some helpful tips that can help you actually implement these changes and be successful? Number one is baby steps. Change is not linear, and especially with something like diet, it really takes time to get used to habits that may have been present for a long time. So, starting small can really make it feel less overwhelming. Social support is really important. Having a network of family, friends, or peers can kind of boost your motivation and your accountability. This doesn't even have to be someone who is making the changes too, just someone who will support you in your goals. Meal planning or even meal prep, this can really help you avoid those impulsive, less nutritious options. It does take a little bit of time, but it will ensure that you have the right ingredients on hand, reduce stress, and even save you more time later throughout the week. Going along with this, keeping healthy foods within reach. Kind of a no brainer, but super helpful. I know for me, if I don't pack enough for like lunch or something, I always end up impulsively snacking on something that's less ideal. Finally, using technology to your advantage. There are tons of apps and online resources that can really help you track your progress, find healthy recipes, and stay informed about nutrition. Feel free to contact us at these emails or visit our website to get some more wellness resources that might be available to you through Gator Care. And I hope you enjoyed this presentation.